in Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, can you hear me there? All right. I wasn't sure if I could hear myself. All right, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, so happy to be back with all of you out there on this beautiful St. Patrick's Day, coming to you here from Glendale, California. I got Jonathan Wilson here with me, who's going to be doing a special edition of Government Grifter of the Week Award.
That's right. We have a guest presenter tonight.
We do. Yeah, this is Juan Tierra. And last week we did
we
make
we had so many calls. The boards were lit up. He couldn't get through. So
that's right.
Tonight we're going to call him.
Okay, good. Good answer. All right. Hey, if you'd like to be part of the program, and right now our boards are wide open, you can call us at 866-870-5752. And if you would like to contribute and support this, remember, this is listener-sponsored radio, taxpayer-supported political action here, just like the cities. And if you want to become part of that, where do they go, Jonathan?
They can go to CaliforniaTaxpayersUnion.org.
Fantastic. Sign there. Make sure we know what your address is so we can get you out a podcast. And feel free to share that link with other people if you like the show. And if you hear anything special, be sure to send it on to a friend and encourage them to listen. Our ratings are going up gradually because of you, and we want to say how much we appreciate your patronage out there, listening to us. We know that you have a lot of choices in the media, a lot of things that you could be doing on a Sunday night, and we're enormously grateful that you have chosen to listen to us and to participate in this program. And, of course, for us, this is our civic duty because bringing these issues to you for your review and consideration is important because we all have to work together to take this country back again. We really do. And that begins with the state and our children.
That's right.
Lots
we got a
of work.
big job here in California to take the state back.
Oh, that we do, I'll tell you. Well, today is St. Patrick's Day. It's always a special day. It's my son and my wife's feast day, as Catholics are wont to say, and that is the Saints' Day. That is their patron saint. So I'm talking to a Baptist over here.
Yeah,
so.
I should know. I don't know much about St. Patrick. Can you give me a little history on that?
Well, I'll do it maybe a little later in the show, but you guys get a kick out of this. When we were promoting one of our events here recently, and one of the groups that we sent our announcements of the school choice event to were the Catholic schools, so we split up the directory so that people could make their calls, and Jonathan ended up in the O. So I've got this Baptist over here, and he's calling Our Lady of Perpetual Help, Our Lady of Loretto, Our Lady of the Miraculous Medal,
Our Lady of Malibu.
Malibu, everything. So he says to me, so hey, what's all this Our Lady stuff? I don't get it. So we have a little fun here as we go along. But today is St. Patrick, and St. Patrick was not an Irishman. He was actually it's confusing sometimes as to where he was from. Some people say from England, others say from North Africa, who ultimately finds his way to Ireland, having been sent there by the Pope to evangelize the Irish people. And he was a very, very great saint and a real character. When I say real character, by that I mean a real person. Sometimes when you're dealing with ancient history, going back into the 4th and 5th century, actually a little bit earlier, for St. Patrick's evangelization of Ireland. It's a question as to whether these people are real sometimes, because the legends become blended with real and sometimes imaginary people. There was a very small written record at the time. The Irish had not yet become the home of monasteries. That was to come later. So the literacy of the Irish followed their evangelization by St. Patrick and others, and you had similar things with the other St. Augustine in Great Britain and so forth. These are great stories, very important, and particularly because when the so-called Dark Ages, which were mostly the barbarian invasions which took place in the 5th, 6th, and 7th centuries and continued, really, Western civilization was eclipsed. And during that time, the Irish, who were rather remote, continued to preserve Western civilization, and later on were part of the intellectual force and the missionary force that returned to Europe and helped to not only re-Christianize Europe after the barbarian invasions, but they also helped to pick up the pieces of Western civilization and preserve the classical traditions intact. So it was a very, very important thing that they did. But anyway, Brooke, if you're listening, that's our a call screener. There'll be a test on this for tomorrow. All right, now we got a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to talk about South Pasadena here. Going to have a caller coming in, but I've got a caller up right now who'd like to chat just a little bit. Carlos, on line 1, can you be good for about 2 minutes, or you want to hold over till I've got somebody calling in at 8:15? What would you like to do?
I'll be concise here.
Okay.
There's been some demonization of Islam by Omar's statements recently.
Yes.
And of course, that's the right to voice their, whoever demonizes Islam, that's their freedom of speech, and that's quite okay. But contrast that with the legislation that is being put forth by our government to deter any criticism or any criticism of Israel, is construed as anti-Semitic. Now that, I think you have a right to criticize Israel if it's right, if Israel gets out of hand. And I think the treatment of the Palestinians has gotten out of hand. That's rightfully so. There shouldn't be any legislation deterring us from voicing our opinion against all the nefarious activities taken by Israel against the Palestinians.
Yeah, without expressing agreement or disagreement with what you say, I just want to take your basic premise, which is criticism of any effort to restrain freedom of speech. I completely disagree with it. I believe in our First Amendment. I don't believe in a lot of the things that are said on a daily basis about Christianity, about Judaism, about a lot of things, but we must absolutely preserve the right and freedom in the United States under our Constitution to criticize these religions if that's what we want to do, or to criticize politics. Once you get into that business, it's a very, very sticky wicket. The next step is very dangerous. Now, reasonable restraints on that speech, of course, are very acceptable, particularly if you have something to say about Islamics. You have no right to enter their place of worship and sound off, much less engage in violence. And likewise here in our own churches, if you disagree with Christianity or Catholicism or Judaism or Mormonism, that's your own business. But you don't have any right to go into their places of worship and start raising hell. I think you and I could agree on that, Carlos.
Well, certainly so, and I think it is Omar's right to voice their opinion about Israel. He's not committing any violence.
Yeah.
Yes, your government is coming out with special legislation, and it's all being construed as being anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, and they're trying to curb any criticisms of Israel.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something real quick. I was fired off a job because I voiced my opinion about Israel's involvement in 9/11. I was fired off a job for that. That was my right to say
Carlos,
that.
I cannot imagine for a moment you expressing your opinion on the job.
I did.
I know you did. Hey, Carlos, I've got my 815 is now called in, and he's logged in. So, con su permiso, I would like to go on to my next caller. I appreciate you being on the show again. All right, next up, we have a good friend of mine, Guillermo, from South Pasadena, who wants to bring us up to date on what's going on in our lovely city. How are you this morning, Guillermo?
Doing pretty good, Mike.
Great.
Good to talk to you.
Hey, great. Next time I've got here, your name is spelled as Guerrillo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's actually Guillermo.
They say Guerrero or Guermo, all kinds.
I know.
I'm used to it.
We're going to have to anglicize your name. Just start calling you Jay or something like that, Joe.
Yeah.
Hey, in any event, you wanted to bring us up on to date on South Pasadena. Let me give the audience a little background. And a lot of you folks out there can say, what in the world are we talking about? South Pasadena again, postage stamp of a city, wealthy, suburban. So what do we care? Well, South Pasadena is a template for what goes on at every city in the state. We could take any city. We probably go into Temple City and come up with the same stuff. But down there in South Pasadena, like everybody else, their pensions have been running wild. Their spending is going crazy. And the California Taxpayers Union, working with local citizens there, qualified an initiative to repeal the utility users tax in South Pasadena, which was generating, how much was it, 2.6 or 3.6 a year?
3.6.
3.6 million a year. And we told everybody who would listen that this $3.6 million a year wasn't going to be enough, that it was just a Band-Aid at best, and that the city of South Pasadena had an underlying fiscal crisis, and they were de facto insolvent. And boy, we you couldn't even hardly get a heartbeat down there. And the utility users tax went down to defeat 80-20. In other words, they rejected the repeal by 80%, which was in effect, voting for the continuation of the UUT, and now it comes up for renewal in 2020. So after, and we published, and I'm proud to have present here with me. I'm the presence of political royalty here. I've got Jonathan Wilson, editor of the Taxpayer Gazette. How many? We produced a special edition down there for South Pasadena. How many did we deliver out there?
I believe it was 2,500. It was.
I think it was closer to 5,000. Yeah.
Oh, five. Oh, right. Yeah. Wow.
5,000 households. We delivered one to every household down there. Had a hell of an impact. The city never came back and contradicted a single thing. They just sat pat and so forth. Now, since then, things have begun to develop. We've got some brand new developments down there in South Pasadena. So, Guillermo, maybe you could let the audience know what those developments are.
Yeah. As far as, when we were fighting the UUT, they were saying we were outsiders and all that, and that the UUT will preserve the city. Well, we were saying exactly that if they keep on this way, there won't be never enough taxes, to solve the problem.
Right. And this is just 90 days ago.
Yeah.
This election was just in November.
Right, and right now they is coming up with $1 million deficit, or you know how they say the cities is facing a $1 million deficit.
Right.
You know?
They got a so-called revenue shortfall. Translation, right. You overspent.
And they're looking for declaring. Of course, the city manager says that the deficit is a modest deficit,
right,
compared to other cities. But also compared to other cities, South Pasadena is a tenth of any other big city.
Yes. Exactly? What are they got a gimmick going on down there in the so-called outreach? They've done this before. So they've developed some surveys and a few things. And
they have a commission now to study the problem, and citizens forums and all that stuff. Of course, that's the excuse that is going to lead to declaring a citywide fiscal emergency to allow for those additional taxes.
That's right. And so right here, in my grubby little hands, I have a printout of the survey that South Pasadena has a link to. I think it's on their website. So here's City of South Pasadena 5-year forecast budget survey. Thank you for your input. The city of South Pasadena is facing budget deficits. Do we have some dramatic music? Is facing some budget deficits.
Jaws. I think we need the Jaws theme.
Okay. In the next several years, ranging from $500,000 a year to $1 million a year or more. Sounds of screaming, crying, weeping, and gnashing of teeth. It's almost biblical. Your input will help your elected representatives make decisions, because apparently they don't know what's going on in their city. Will help to make decisions on a series of potential solutions to close the deficit and ensure financial sustainability to maintain and improve the quality of life in South Pasadena. Sound of organ playing, quality of life. Now, this is all a fraud, a hustle, and a con, isn't it?
Yeah. And all those researches they do, they never mention, cutting spending.
Right.
It's never mentioned in any of this conversation.
Right. The fact is that they've overspent. They spend too much. They hire too many people to do too many things, and then pay them too much to do it, and promise them to pay that forever, called a pension. Now, these screwballs here, there's so many lies packed up in just this one thing. It's like listening to Clinton or Obama. There's so many lies just in one single paragraph. They say the city of South Pasadena is facing budget deficits in the next several years, ranging from $500,000 a year to $1 million or more. Well, that's nonsense. It's a hell of a lot more than that, because the city of South Pasadena, like all the other cities, have failed to properly state the pension deficit, and they keep using these old assumptions there. And if they actually properly stated those obligations and faced up to them, they would have to be putting a lot more money into the system, and their real deficit would actually be greater, wouldn't it?
Yes. And also the CalPERS problem, they say that the city has no control over the CalPERS situation. So if they don't have control, who has control? Well,
yeah. See, now that's total BS. All right. Yeah. Now, it may be a very difficult problem to control, but when they say they don't have any control over CalPERS, what the hell does that mean? You hired the people,
right?
You set their salaries. When you hired them, you knew that they were part of the CalPERS system. You get the reports from CalPERS all the time, and you know that their returns are just awful and that your deficits are growing. Well, what you could do down there How many people do they have on the council down there? 5?
Yeah.
All right,
5.
so the 5 dwarves down there in 91030, the 5 dwarves down there could actually, whip out their checkbooks and pay their bills. They can pay what they owe. And I'll tell you what, if you're a public employee and you're listening in here and your stomach starts churning when you hear me talking because you really hate us, or when we have the Government Grifter of the Week award and you start getting angry. No, the people that you ought to be angry at their ace are the 5 dwarves who sit on the city council who are not telling you the truth. They're not telling the taxpayers the truth. They're not telling anybody the truth. They're lying, and they're upside down by at least 20 to 30 million. What do we estimate? I haven't been able to look.
I can't remember, but that sounds about right.
The revenues of the city are like 27 million.
Something. Yeah. And their pension deficit, even with CalPERS, is at least 22 million.
Yeah.
And the actual if you take real returns without these the fantasy land, interest projections on investments.
Yeah. Now they're starting to recognize that the return from CalPERS is not going to be as big as they estimated.
Right. And as maybe the loudest voice of the outsiders, I told you so. And you know something, Guillermo. You know what the worst thing about this whole thing is that they actually know.
Mm-hmm.
They
know. Yeah, because they just have a plan. They already mentioning that they want to possibility of declaring the fiscal emergency.
Yes. Yeah.
And once they do that, then they will be allowed to put more taxes.
Yeah, that's obviously they're not talking about cutting salaries. They do occasionally talk about cutting
services.
And they say,
but salaries never, but services, yes.
Correct, exactly.
Yeah.
Say, do you want parking meters? Oh, how about a dope store, a cannabis store? That'll bring $48,000. Ah! They start screaming down there.
Yeah, but it will bring everybody's property values down.
That's right.
Because the banks won't lend to, people buying next door to a marijuana place.
Yeah. Exactly. So they bring up all these things. Oh, and then, of course, buried in the survey, question number 8, increase the sales tax by 0.75 cents. Oh, what a surprise that is. And question title, a public safety parcel tax, don't you know? Too much.
Yeah.
Hey, Guillermo, I know you got to go. I want because you got to play somewhere tonight. And he's an outstanding musician. I hear him sometime if you can. I won't give out his last name. But in any event, I appreciate you coming on the show, Guillermo. And I'm delighted that you're out there working and feeling better. And everybody, will be back with you after the break, and we'll continue with our callers, Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, RadioFreeLosAngeles.net. Back with you after the break.
Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
You bet it is. Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, here with you on this beautiful St. Patrick's Day evening. If you'd like to be part of the show, our lines are wide open at 866-870-5752. And Jonathan, where do they go? What do they do if they want to connect with us?
Well, you can visit our website, schoolchoice2020.org, and I just posted the PragerU videos on School Choice. So definitely visit our website and check those videos out. And while you're there, maybe give us a contribution.
That's it.
Hit that contribute button and choose your contribution level. As little as $5 a month will really help us.
It really will. We'll talk a little bit more about school choice later on the show, as we often do. And as we say around our office there, don't tell me that you support school choice if you don't support school choice. Because remember, we need a demonstration of your support and broad and wide support for what we're trying to do. And we can't, if we don't have this kind of demonstrated, documented support, then we are not going to be able to persuade the large political investors to come aboard. And they are out there waiting for us. There's reason why they should be optimistic about California. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit. Right now we have Eric from San Fernando. Eric, you want to comment, I think, on the statements of a previous caller.
Yes, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you.
Excellent.
I know that this is not the overriding topic of your program, but I tuned in tonight. I happened to tune in tonight when you were talking with the caller that was saying that we should have the right to criticize Israel if we feel like it.
Yes.
And so I wanted to address that a little bit. I am in total agreement with that. And, I'm a Christian patriot, and I'm well, I don't use the word conservative anymore. I think the labels are divisive, and we need to unite the country. But for lack of a better term right now, I am not afraid to say that I am not a Zionist. And I happen to think that the regime in the state of Israel is a corrupt one. And I think that I have figured out why they're so defensive of that regime over there, and why anybody that has any criticism of it comes under attack. It's called anti-Semitic, which is ridiculous. I'm a Christian Jew. I'm a Hebrew Christian.
Yes. And
you can't change that. And to me, that's a double blessing anyway.
Right.
So all this controlled debate over that is so one-sided. And I think it's a shame that the right, in particular, so many people on the right are so caught up in that speak no evil of Israel. Well, we need to get along with everybody, actually. But we have words of
Well, Eric.
It doesn't mean that I'm pro-Palestinian or that I'm,
sure.
Either.
Hey, look, Israel is a nation. It's a nation which has interests, and those interests are always going to take precedence over the needs and the policies of other nations, and we will oftentimes find ourselves in conflict with other nations, and that has happened from time to time with Israel. I don't think that we owe any country, even our cousins in the British Isles, in Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. I don't think we owe anybody uncritical support. Period. But we see Israel come under attack, I think, increasingly from the left, which has decided to make common cause with with a lot of the Islamic interests and organizations. And between the two, they are very hostile to organized religion, to Christianity, and to Judaism, particularly to Israel. But it's politics mixed in with it. But under no circumstances do those geopolitical concerns ever justify any direct or indirect restriction of Americans' right to speak. The Congress has different considerations because it runs its own house and it's entitled to censure or sanction members for their speech in certain areas. That's up to the Congress. But you and I should oppose this at any time and any place, and instead, we should be working with others to advance our own policy objectives. And here tonight, the only reason I'm not going into it is because typically we don't do international issues, Christianity versus Judaism or Islam, except as it may from time to time bear on our state and local issues, and we do get them. But we definitely want to prevent any kind of general outbreak of anti-Semitism. It hasn't. It didn't go well in the last century, and if we allow them, if we back off on on the unjustified criticism of a religious minority, sooner or later that will be directed at us. And as you know, in the Middle East, there are many Christians being killed every day. In fact, some people have done research suggesting that the rate of Christian deaths, particularly in the Middle East, is greater than it was during the persecutions of the Roman Empire. So we always, we in America always have to stand for religious freedom, period, and shy away from anything that that demonizes people of other religions, even as they seem to want to engage in that process themselves. And we saw a bit of that here over the weekend, following in the wake of that New Zealand business, which I think I might comment on a little bit more later. But Eric, I want to thank you for calling in and very temperately and thoughtfully commenting on this constitutional issue. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, all right, you're welcome. And next up is my amigo Mike from El Segundo. How are you tonight, Mike?
Fine, thank you, Mike. I'd like to talk to you about two, or if I may, maybe even three subjects. One is I want to speak in defense of Israel.
Yes.
Israel's a huge victim of intentional fake news by leftists and by Islamists. And I also want to talk about the public employee pensions. In fact, maybe I'll take that one on first and try to keep it short. And then I want to talk about charter schools.
Yes, please.
Okay, public employee pensions. One way you control the CalPERS pensions is you stop giving these huge, ridiculous pay raises. Because every time a city council votes in secret, they meet with the labor union's representatives, or the city council's representative, their labor attorney typically will meet with the union's representative, all in secret, behind closed doors. By the time you see the union contract that's already been agreed to in public, in the light of day, on the city council agenda, it's a done deal. It's already been approved before the voters and taxpayers have a chance to even see it, to object to it. It's a totally corrupt process.
Yes.
And the way you get some control over these totally unsustainable CalPERS pensions is you keep the raises small, or you stop giving raises. One of my proposals is that you don't negotiate pay raises. You negotiate total compensation costs, everything. So you have a cost for the salary, you have a cost for the health care and dental and life insurance benefits, all that, and you have a cost for these CalPERS pensions. All these city councils should be negotiating the bottom line cost, and in some cases make that go lower and make the employees pay a bigger share of their pension contribution.
Yeah, a couple of comments on that. Number one, they don't do it because they don't even run the numbers. right?
That's right. They have no idea what the gifts they're handing out, and then they come back to raise taxes and fees on the residents and businesses, and
Correct.
The businesses pass those increased tax and fees on to the customers, so we end up
that's right. And
paying the full burden.
I want everybody in the audience to know exactly what goes on in those in that process of establishing compensation. They do something there. You talked, Mike, about negotiating a total package. In other words, all in, this employee is going to cost me so much in salary, so much in benefits, so much in whatever, and there's the total package cost. And in fact, that goes on in American industry each and every day with every private sector employee. Because, as you know, you're going to go to jail if you negotiate for the payment of pension plans, put them into the plan, and then you fail to make the deferrals that are required. They're called deferrals. They're pension plan contributions. Two things. That number, first of all, has to be a real number. And you can't just go out and hire some actuary on PCP like CalPERS does, get some phony baloney number, put it in there, and then underfund your pension plan. You can't do that. Department of Labor will shut you down. You'll go to jail over that stuff.
That's right. And this whole CalPERS pension system is a total fraud. There was Senate Bill 400, California State Senate Bill 400, passed almost unanimously. Republicans and Democrats voted for it back in 1999. It became effective in, I believe it was January 2000, that increased the pension formulas for all government employees, so safety employees. Police and fire got a maximum of 3% of their single highest year of service, or in some cities it might be of the 3 highest years or average of 3 highest years.
It was basically a 50% increase, not negotiated, right? Which is this is another thing, Mike. I don't know if you had a chance to read much about the Cal Fire case, but the Cal Fire case made a number of distinctions, one of which was a distinction between an increase in salary that came about as the result of a negotiation, that is, arising out of contract, versus a negotiation that was granted by operation of law. And those that are compensation or benefits granted just by operation of law, that is, legislative act, are not, according to the Cal Fire case, are not irrevocable. They can be modified. So
that's a huge problem because.
Hang on. I want to finish. Hang on, Mike. I want to finish clarifying this for the public, and that is that in 1999, that 50% increase was unilateral. Number one, it was not as a result of negotiations with employees. They just gave it to them. And number two, that increase carried with it no additional mandated contributions. And at that moment, the pension crisis that we have now was created. There is some good news. If we went back to the old formula, if for whatever reason it were judged not to be a negotiated benefit, if we went back to the old formula, is my belief that the current pension system would not only be fully funded, it might be overfunded. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you very much. And the great information you provided, that's right. What I want to say was that it's totally unfair and unrealistic, unreasonable, irrational to say by law or have courts say that if a city council gives some new benefit to a city employee union, you cannot ever take that back again, that is given a gift for life, because then things only ratchet in the wrong direction of ever-increasing costs. We had El Segundo, a police lieutenant last year, who was paid over $400,000 total compensation.
Down there in El Segundo?
Yeah, it's a small department, too.
Sure.
So if you look at transparentcalifornia.com, you can pull that up. And these pensions the police and firefighters are getting are between $1,000 and $200,000 a year. Almost all the calls are paramedic calls, occasionally someone stuck in an elevator. El Segundo has only 0, 1, or maybe 2 major structure fires per year. which major meaning $100,000 or more in damage to a structure, including water and smoke damage. So
right.
It's pretty easy to get up there. It's not as high risk for the most part as the unions like to make it out to be.
Right.
Police and firefighters typically rate about anywhere from 10th to maybe 13th highest most dangerous professions.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to get on to Israel because the previous caller seemed to be extremely misinformed, probably because of fake news media, unless he is an anti-Semite. You know, as Dennis Prager likes to say, and he's totally correct on this, why is it that people attack Israel and say they're not an anti-Semite with very unfair and inaccurate attacks? That would be like saying, well, you know, I don't hate Italian people, but I hate the country of Italy, and I think Italy does not have a right to exist as an Italian country, because the previous caller, by saying he's anti-Zionism or not Zionist, that's what he's saying.
Right.
Zionism means you believe in the right of Israel to exist
yes.
as a Jewish nation or state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been, Jews have occupied, not occupied, they've lived in that land going back, was it 3,000 or 4,000 years? Goes way back. They keep digging up artifacts, thousands of years old, Jewish artifacts with Jewish symbols and icons.
Hey, Mike, are you Jewish?
I sure am.
Okay, no, I was just the reason I asked is that because in the readings for Mass today, and some of these readings are read in a lot of Christian churches as well, who adhere to the Catholic system of readings throughout the year. But one of them, I don't know which book of the Bible it was, but it describes a conversation between Abram and God, in which this very land, from somewhere around Egypt all the way up to what they call the Great River, which is the Euphrates, was promised to the Jews forever. It's very interesting.
From the river to the sea.
Yeah, right. From the river to the sea. It was very interesting, very biblical, and the idea that somehow the Jews, wherever they came from, whatever countries they returned from, the idea that they're interlopers in their own country is a curious notion.
Well, you hit the nail on the head right there, because that's the reason the false identity of Palestinian was created by Yasser Arafat, I believe in the 1970s. Yasser Arafat, for people who do not know, was the head of the Muslim Arab terrorist organization called the Palestine Liberation Organization.
But as a matter of fact, the British, Mike,
Mike, what?
I say, as a matter of fact, though, Mike, the British had invented the term Palestine to apply to this patchwork of countries in that area.
Back actually to the days of the Roman Empire, a long time ago, when the Romans wanted to humiliate the Jews. So they renamed the Jewish land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael. They renamed it to a name that was something like Palestine or based on the Palestinians. And then the British, after World War I, when they were in charge of all that land, they called it the Palestine Mandate.
Yes.
And at that time, after World War I, that was considered, if anyone ever used the term Palestinian, that typically referred to a Jew, actually, not an Arab Muslim.
Sure.
And what happened was, under advice and tutelage from the communist Soviet government, the Yasser Arafat was advised to start calling themselves Palestinian and create this false identity and culture and history, which doesn't even exist there other than like 2 or 3 generations, of a Palestinian people and state to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel and the Jews' right to that land in the world.
Right.
So it's a total fraud. There's no Palestinian ancient coins. There's no Palestinian ancient heritage. Most of the Arab Muslims in the so-called Palestine area, the Judea and Samaria.
What's so fascinating about that is that Yasser Arafat and others were eager to justify the creation of a state based upon some alleged or supposed racial or religious affinity that could be called the Palestinian people.
Was Egyptian. He was from Egypt.
No, I understand. Stay with me. I'm going to make it.
Palestinian Arab Muslims came from other Arab countries in the area, in the region.
Believe me, I do understand. So they'd assembled this this very diverse and motley group who had no true unifying tribal characteristic, but whatever it was, they claimed that all put together, it justified the creation of an independent state called Palestine, which would be opposed to and juxtaposed to the state of Israel. And yet the state of Israel, which was in fact based upon historical connections, an identifiable racial and religious group of people who had at various times in history been their own government, they were declared illegitimate. And
exactly. It's a total fraud, including being perpetrated by the fake mainstream news media in the U.S. and in Europe and elsewhere in the world, because the media is dominated by anti-Semitic, anti-American, anti-Western civilization Marxists.
That's right.
And the Democrat Party has been going more and more anti-Semitic. And every Jew, I as a Jewish person who's lucky to have been born, because my mom survived the pogroms in communist Russia, the mass murder of Jews because they were Jewish there, and that's a part of history that seems to have gone down the memory hole. They tried to cover that up, what the communists were doing to the Jews. And my wife's father was in a communist torture prison in China. He was born in America, went to live there with some relatives, and then the communists started the revolution, and he got thrown in the torture prison. He was one of the few survivors. He managed to escape and eventually get back to America. So my wife and I are both
Mike, I want to say,
we were ever born.
Mike, I want to say that I appreciate your comments on all the fronts as usual. I'm coming up on the 9 o'clock hour, and I've got one guy that's been holding for a while, so I'd like to take him. Thanks again for all of your input on all these issues. It's always great to hear from you. Next up, we have George from Los Angeles. How are you this evening, George?
Well, I'm pretty good, and I was listening to what you and Mike were talking about, and that's why I was calling, because I believe it is even more profound than that. And your first caller that was saying these things, he has his right to his opinion, but of course, the fake news and the lack of knowledge of history is a thing that is a principal point of Marxism. History begins now. Forget the past, or if you don't forget it, revisionism, change it. Well, the League of Nations began following the First World War, and it made all of the decisions about reparations and about the lands that, again, had formerly been in the Ottoman Empire that was the ally of the the Austro-Hungarians and the Germans. Well, the mandate that was set out, it was called the Jewish Mandate or the Zionist Mandate, and it was voted on by the League of Nations, and by 1923, after the Balfour Declaration from Lord Balfour, who had said to the committee that was, carving up these lands that, the Jews should have a home for all of them themselves in perpetuity. And that was the start of international law. And when the Israelis had their War of Independence in 1948, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank ended up because they had Syria and Jordan and
that's right.
Egypt and Iraq.
Okay, hey, George, that music that you hear means I'm done. If you'd like to hang on till after the top of the hour, you're welcome to do so. Otherwise, I'll thank you for your participation. We will be back after 9 o'clock. This is Mike Alexander, Jonathan Wilson, Radio Free Los Angeles, back with you after the break.
Southern California. This is Radio Free Los Angeles. Do you copy? Repeat, do you copy?
Now transmitting from behind the Iron Curtain in the People's Republic of California, we bring you the voice of free men, free markets, and limited constitutional government. Welcome to citizen-sponsored Radio Free Los Angeles. with President of the California Taxpayers Union, Mike Alexander, and editor of the Taxpayer Gazette, Jonathan Wilson.
All right, you're right about that. This is Mike Alexander and Jonathan Wilson. We're both delighted to be with you here this beautiful Sunday evening. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you out there. And when I get home, I'm going to have some corned beef and cabbage.
Are you Irish?
Well, you know, I'm mostly American, but yes, if you, some of my family have done those DNA.
You're Native American?
Yes, I'm Native American, absolutely. Born in Huntington Park. What else? Yeah, my grandmother's my grandmother's family was from Ireland. Other of our relatives are from Ireland, but then that gets mixed in with everything else out there. I do like Ireland, and I'm happy to claim that heritage, but I'm very, very American.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that drives me nuts is when I hear people being referred to as Irish American or Italian American. I mean, these are routine references. I don't like the hyphenation for myself or anybody else. I'm glad to. It's just like those questionnaires they ask you to claim your heritage, right? Well, the only place where I put down my race is on a medical form. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they want to know who I am. I'm American. Yeah. Period. Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm kind of interested in people's genealogy.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. I did some research a few years ago on my genealogy.
Yeah, and what happened?
the computer started smoking.
Yeah, right. I know. I know.
No, but I did. All of my roots go back to Scotch-Irish.
Yeah, exactly. Same with ours.
I did have my fifth great grandmother, third great grandmother was a Cherokee Indian.
Yeah.
So I'm more Native American than Elizabeth Warren.
I know.
I could start claiming that.
We're gonna get a swap out there. Maybe we get you some extra money here. Well, look.
I might have to wear a headdress next week.
Don't start with me. At any rate, hey, let's go back to George. He's holding on line 1 there. We're going to continue our conversation a little bit about George's criticism of the first caller of the evening, who was a little heavy in his criticism of Israel. And George has been offering some context and some perspective.
Yes, a little history, Mike. I think everyone remembers the Six-Day War.
Yes.
And initially when Israel fought and gained its independence, there are so many little tiny countries in Africa and in Micronesia and in other parts of the world that are Muslim. This is why in the United Nations there are just so many votes against Israel every year.
Right.
Well, the Six-Day War came, and it just so happened, of course, that all of the Arab countries planned an attack on Israel, and in 6 days, Israel took the Sinai Desert all the way down almost to the Red Sea.
Right.
And
this was in 1967.
That's right, in 1967, and they regained the Golan Heights to keep the Jordanians from pitching those artillery shells down on the people down below. And they took the rest of, Jerusalem. And, of course, as time went on, we had the Yom Kippur War.
Right.
And, of course, this embarrassed the Soviets because their equipment, military equipment, was very bad.
Yep.
And so in accordance with...
That was 1973.
73. And in accordance with international law, these are considered spoils of war.
That's right.
So, in essence, Yasser Arafat and all of his people are not only fraudsters, like Mike was saying, and trying to make it the Islamic folks, had a stake there. They did not have a stake according to international law, and so they're actually trespassers.
Sure.
But the Israelis have been really nice to them and said, look, you guys just settle down, have a good life, and, there's even Muslim judges and councilmen and stuff in Israel, and in both in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
I'll say this: when you
gives them all their water, their electricity, and a whole bunch of food.
I want to make a couple of comments that I think that are related. You were talking about history, but you're also talking about the issue of propaganda, and and propaganda can be the less history the more likely propaganda is to be effective with you or with somebody else. Yeah. And I remember some of the things that we know or don't know about the Middle East. I remember being very surprised to learn just how many Jews there are in Iran. Yeah. Tons of them. And despite the rhetoric at the highest level, many of those societies have arrived at some kind of accommodation where these Jews have been in the area of in the region for hundreds of years, really, with families.
Of years.
Yeah, within the confines of Persia, now Iran, and so forth. Yeah. And we have the similar cliches about Israel, where we imagine a place where which is run by four Jews, in which everybody else there is denied citizenship, denied access, denied participation in the society. But that's manifestly not the case.
Right.
In these situations, always much more complex than people think. And yet we're talking here about the power of propaganda.
That's true.
And now I want to shift for just a moment to our friends, to the situation down in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Oh.
So this guy who decides to invade this mosque and kill all these Muslims, leaving that terrible crime aside for a moment. Much has been said. I won't comment on that. It's a terrible event.
Yes.
What I found more interesting was this guy's mindset, in which he felt that he had American society dialed in. And he was convinced that with his actions promoted and propelled, augmented by the international media, he felt that he could manipulate the international propaganda machine right here in the United States and bring about a civil riot. Such was the effect of the media on him, what he had observed from the media's propaganda successes, and such has been the success of media in general in distorting many situations. In fact, lying to us about ourselves all the time here in the United States, lying to us about Jews, lying to Jews about Muslims, lying to blacks about whites and whites about blacks, Latinos to gringos, you name it. We have a very insidious apparatus throughout the world. It's a worldwide propaganda apparatus that is at work 24 hours a day.
Yes, and this is where we are a nation of laws, and following these laws is a very easy thing to do. It's called the English language, and looking at what the rules are, the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and then looking how it's been interpreted in various cases in terms of case law. So
that's
this
right.
is a real simple thing. And this guy goes into a house of worship and kills people praying.
Right, as if we didn't have enough problems with Islamics
in
this world. Yeah,
said about Jewish people and Christians, oh, they're people of the book, and if you're a Muslim, you can marry them. But then he had his battles with some other, Arab clans and tribes, and he began proselytizing by sword. And then this is when the concept, the infidels, and, kill them or charge them the tax and all this stuff comes up.
Well, George is one infidel to the other. This is a good point to take off. I've got Government Grifter of the Week award coming up later.
Well, I want to tell you one thing about somebody retiring. There was up, I believe, someplace in the Central Coast in Northern California. There's a librarian.
Yeah.
She was getting her $5,000 a month in retirement. Very small city, and they were handling all this stuff themselves. And they said, "Oh my God, we just can't keep this up." And so they sent a letter to her, and they said, we're very sorry, but our plan is only 61% funded, so now we can only send you $3,000 a month.
Right.
And so one of the key things in any retirement system, if you want to insure it, take responsibility yourself and put 15% away of your income and put at least that much aside every paycheck.
I'm with you. George, thanks for being a caller. Thanks for being part of this audience. We appreciate it. Next up, we have Linda from Burbank. How are you this morning, Linda? This evening. Good to hear from you again.
Oh, before I go into what I found out about Congresswoman Omar,
yes,
I have a question about that mosque.
I don't know anything about it.
The mosque that got shot up.
Yes.
How is it called the Christ Church? That doesn't make any sense.
No, Christ Church is the name of the city.
Oh, the city. Oh, okay.
I can see. Yeah.
I kept hearing it. I kept thinking that was the name of the mosque. I'm going, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's a city in New Zealand. In fact, it was hit hard by an earthquake here a few years ago. Now they got to deal with this. If you got a quick comment on Congresswoman Omar.
I found out that she married her brother to stay.
Oh, yeah.
Citizenship.
Yeah. It was a
fraud?
It was immigration fraud. They're all out there doing. Nobody's got a word to say, and now because she's female, Muslim, this and that and everything else, and wildly liberal. I don't know if you want to call it liberal, just radical. Nobody can say anything about her. But Linda from Burbank just did.
She raised money for CARE that funded Hamas.
Oh, she's all in. She's all in. All these people are, and they're engaging in terrible, careless rhetoric that ought not to characterize or be coming from the mouth of any elected representative. She represents somebody besides herself. But leftists and liberals, they think that they just go out there. They got elected, and they just get to be who they are and to say what they want to say, and the hell with everybody else in the district. And that is our current problem.
As well as was that other Muslim congresswoman on the Quran.
Well, I'm with you. Hey, Linda, I got to run. I got one more. When do you need to start in, Jonathan?
Probably. We got 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Let me take a quick call here.
5 minutes, maybe.
5 minutes. Yeah. Okay, let me take a quick call from Gloria in Huntington Beach. How are you this evening, Gloria? I think this is the second time that you called, second or third. Hey, I lost you, Gloria. Call back in. 866-870-5752. I don't know what happened out there, but at any rate, she had a comment here about Governor Newsom's So I'd love to hear her. So call back in, Gloria. We'd love to hear from you. In any event, it was kind of interesting the turn that the show took tonight.
Yeah, I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
And, I asked you during one of our breaks, we were talking about Palestine. And I'm wondering if there's any relation to the Philistines in the Old Testament, the group that was always up against the Israelites. Philistine, Palestine. I wonder if anybody knows anything about that. Give us a call.
I really don't know. I should know that, but we've got John, our government grifter of the week caller, will be calling in here. Well, at any rate, while I got a couple of minutes before you just give me the high sign. When we need to cut to the government grifter of the week award. But, I was just reading some more stuff in this article, and I want to give a hat tip here to the South Pasadena Review.com, South Pasadena Review.com. They recently did an article there. They're talking about these guys here with on CalPERS. I'm talking again about South Pasadena. And they said the 5-year forecast demonstrates the city revenues are not projected to keep pace with these rising costs, and that would be pension costs. Further, the UUT will sunset in 2022 if not removed. The loss of $3.4 million would dangerously... Oh, I got Gloria back here. We'll get back to that. Hey, Gloria, I hope that wasn't us.
Oh, hi, Mike. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I don't know, how much did you hear? It was about
nothing.
Governor Newsom.
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. About Gavin Newsom, I know he doesn't want to keep the death penalty going because he's afraid that there's so many innocent men on death row that he doesn't want to keep be responsible for their deaths.
Yeah. Well, the problem is when you run for governor, you need to make it clear what your attitude about the death penalty is, number one. Number two, you swear to uphold the laws of the state of California, and the death penalty has been held legal, by the United States Supreme Court. Has been greatly constricted, but the death penalty is valid here in the state of California. And you just have to... Now, by the way... and I'll probably get in trouble with some of my audience, but I too have a lot of misgivings about a lot of these convictions. They're a problem. I'm not opposed to the death penalty itself. My problem is in knowing whether we can actually, in these circumstances, get it right. But for all those death penalty advocates out there, please don't call and raise hell with me. I know that these that these cases are reviewed at great length and ad nauseum. But in any event, hey, look, we're coming up on the end of it. Gloria, I want to thank you very much.
I wanted to ask you one more thing.
Sure, quick.
I just heard yesterday that he is the nephew of Nancy Pelosi. Am I correct?
No, I didn't know that. Nuisance is?
I heard that on this radio.
Oh, my God.
Yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Talk about an unholy family. All right, boy. Hey, I'll check it out, Gloria. We'll get back to you next week. And right now I know Mike is calling us with the answer on the Philistines question, but we do have to move to John on line 7.
Well, we need an introduction.
Music,
please.
Hey, music. Maestro, please. We have a special presenter.
And now, live from Glendale, California, it's this week's Government Grifter Awards. And we have a very special evening planned for this week's awards. We have a guest presenter, Mr. Juan Tierra from Mount Washington. Are you there, Juan?
Yes, sir, Mr. Wilson, I am.
Welcome to the Government Grifter Awards in Radio Free Los Angeles.
All right.
Good to be here, and I have to use a nom de plume or a nom de guerre or a nom de something because I live in a leftist enclave.
A nom de radio.
He doesn't want his neighbors to know who he really is.
All right. We're just going to call him Juan. All right, Juan.
Well, I'm honored to be a guest nominator for this great award. All nominees are from the state of California.
Okay.
The first two are people who can stash their the unused vacation, get a lump sum payout, unlike private business.
Yeah.
From last year, the first nominee, a Caltrans engineer, retired with a princely sum of $405,000.
Whoa!
And that was just outdone. That was just a retirement payment. Is that what that was?
Well, you stack it. Actually, you're not supposed to be able to use 64%, but they do it anyway. Second one, not to be outdone, a prison doctor left with a lump sum of $456,000.
Yeah, and that was just his final payment. That's not including all the many years of pension coming ahead.
That's not the pension. That's not the health benefits. That's just a lump as you walk out the door.
Wow.
And third, and this is from the state of California, Transparent California's fiscal year 2017, our list of highly compensated employees. Would you believe a correctional sergeant, regular pay, overtime, other pay, came to a grand total of $634,214.
Wow.
Now, the question is, fill me in. If a correctional sergeant gets that kind of money, what might a correctional lieutenant get?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
a captain or a major.
That's right. Now, for all there's a lot of people out there who will be saying, "Hey, look, these things aren't being calculated quite correctly, and they're lump sum payments." Yeah, let me just say, I don't care how the hell it came about. It's way too much money. And on top of that, I know that they won't get that much every year, but it's all way too much money, and we're all just dead broke. This whole damn thing is
California can't control costs.
No, he can't. He can't. Well, look, I tell you what, who's going to pick it?
I think we're going to have Juan pick the winner.
All right, Juan.
So
all right.
Drum roll, please.
Drum roll.
Correctional sergeant.
All right. Congratulations,
all right.
Correctional Sergeant. This is your first nomination and your first Grifter Award.
Right.
And we'd like to thank Juan Tierra of Mount Washington.
Thank you, Juan. We appreciate
My
it.
pleasure, sir.
All right, come back with us again. I've got like 60 seconds, and Mike called back in. He's got the answer on the Philistines question. Mike, go. You got 60 seconds to be brilliant.
The ancient Romans had conquered the land, and the Jewish land of Israel, they purposely, intentionally renamed it to a name that was something like Philistine or something along those lines, implying the Philistines, even though it was not Philistine land, it was Jewish land. They did that to humiliate the Jews.
Interesting. So that makes sense.
It's in the Jewish land of Israel, Eretz Yisrael.
Huh.
So ultimately, is it your opinion that Palestine, the word Palestine, is derived from the word for Philistines in Latin?
Well, it's derived from the ancient name the Romans gave to that land.
Okay.
So it comes from that they just mentioned, and then it was called by the British after World War I. It's called the Palestine Mandate. And by the way, the Ottoman Empire controlled a lot of that land, and they fought in World War I inside Germany. They were on the losing side.
Yeah, we know.
So that land got divided up, and Great Britain created all these artificial boundaries for all these inner-Muslim.
Hey, Mike, that music that you're hearing means that our time's up. I want to thank you for being on. I want to thank everybody else out there this evening for calling and being part of the show. We really enjoy talking to you here on Sunday night. Hope that you'll join us next Sunday night, 8 o'clock, for another edition of Radio Free Los Angeles. And thank you, Jeff, our control guy. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Jonathan.
Great
thank
show,
you, everybody.
Mike.
See you next week.